Hello! We're here for another members only full moon video. And of course, all of you know that I am astrologer coach Sonia Francis. We have a full moon coming up on November 23rd, very, very early in the morning on the East Coast at 12:39 a.m. New York time and at 5:39 a.m. London time. So the full moon will be exact in almost 1 degree of Gemini, Sagittarius. And so when we talk about full moons, this always gives us a chance to realize how far we've come since the last lunation, since the last new moon. So what we usually gain a better understanding or insight about is whether we are where we'd like to be, because the full moon gives us this awareness of where am I at? And so we can get a sense for whether we want to be making some major adjustments or if we're happy with how far we've come since the time of the new moon. Now, full moons also highlight relationships, because an opposition always highlights relationships. And so sometimes a full moon can bring about a crisis to heighten our awareness of any imbalance that we're experiencing internally. And so thereby pointing us towards the need for integration of the polarities that are in play. And so in this case, with this full moon, we're dealing with the polarity of Sagittarius and Gemini. And we'll seek the balance and to integrate those two poles within ourselves or within our relationships with other people. And so let's talk a little bit about those two signs and see what the energies are about. Now, Sagittarius, where the sun will be, the sun is going to be in Sagittarius, shows us a wider perspective and is asking us to look beyond facts and learned knowledge to our life experiences and to the wisdom that we've gained from interacting with life or living, right? And so it's really interested, Sagittarius is interested in the bigger picture and the truth about life. Kind of like if you think of it from more a philosophical standpoint or, from a place of, what works in life for us. And also what you can ask yourself with this Sagittarian energy here for this full moon is what might I be able to learn from traveling or from an adventure or simply by breaking from my regular routine that I'm used to? And what types of experiences might broaden my horizons? And is it at least possible that a new perspective might retroactively change what I have been through or what I have experienced in the past? So what we want to look at with Sagittarius is like how could our perspective about something shift, what we've actually been through. And that can be very effective, actually, when we have been through traumatic events or when we've experienced emotional interactions or experiences or where we felt disempowered in some way. When we try to look at that from a larger perspective, when we try to shift a little bit how we look at something that we have experienced, it can really change the memory of that experience, and it can change our relationship to that experience quite a bit. So that last question was a really, really good one. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. So is it at least possible that a new perspective might retroactively change what I have been through or what I have experienced? And so I just want you to, with these questions, of course, as always, just sit with the questions or journal on them or meditate on them. You do not have to answer these questions right away. That's not the purpose of the question. It's not a quiz in how much you know or don't know. It's more about, intuitively investigating and feeling into these questions, kind of getting a sense for, okay, what answers are coming to me as I'm posing these questions, or what do I experience when I ask these questions? Because sometimes answers can come to us in a lot of different ways. You know, they don't just have to come from our own intuitive thinking. They can also come through other people, or through a song, or through a conversation that we're having, or something that we even overhear somebody else say, right? So there's a lot of ways we can receive answers. So just stay open to that as best as you can. Now, Gemini, which is the other side of that polarity, wants us to stay connected to our immediate environment, our communities that we're in touch with, and our day-to-day mind, or our day-to-day thinking. And so it wants us processing and sharing information as fast and as much as possible. Gemini always wants to stay in contact and in connection with, you know, everything that it can have a conversation with, or can share information with. Now, Gemini is definitely interested in the spoken and in the written word, because that's where the information comes from, right? So ask yourself with Gemini, how do logic and language enrich my life? And how could I better experience the power of my mind on a daily basis? And how does my inner dialogue contribute to that as well? And this is a very important question, because very often when we think of communication, when we think of sharing or in exchange of information, we very often think about something that happens between us and some other medium, whether that's another person, or whether that's, you know, we're getting information through the internet, or through the television, or, you know, a book, or whatever it may be, right? But very seldomly do we think about information coming to us through ourselves, because our own processing, our own inner dialogue, right, our own inner thinking is part of that as well. And that can be very powerful to investigate and to observe and to see, like, what's my own thinking process when it comes to information, you know, and how do I process that? What do I do with information? How do I share it? What do I not share? You know, does it feel empowering to me what I say to myself? You know, these words words or thoughts, you know, whatever you want to call them, that go on internally, they can have a huge impact on how we feel and how we experience life. So this is a really, really big and important question. How does my inner dialogue contribute to my experience of the power of my mind, right? And what do I learn from my interactions with other people? And of course, that's the other side of it, right? It's like we interact with other people, we share, we connect, we talk, we listen or not, you know. So what do I learn from my interactions with other people, and what am I willing to learn? Because, you know, often, you know, we also need to have an openness or a willingness to learn from the things that we're experiencing with other people. I call it sort of like the feedback loop, you know, like being able to be able to receive feedback from other people, to be able to listen to what other people tell us, you know, about ourselves, or about what it is that we're sharing, or what it is that we're offering. You know, I think that can be very powerful, you know, and it doesn't mean we have to necessarily listen to every single thing that comes through, but I think there is sort of like, you know, if there is an openness and an appreciation of feedback from other people, then we can start to take it in a little bit better, and then we can decide or make a choice. You know, is this actually valuable to me, or is it not valuable to me? Or have I heard this feedback several times already? And if I have, maybe it's important for me to listen to that. So there's, you know, various levels of how we can interact with the information that we're receiving from other people, right? Now, so we're being asked here with the Gemini energy and the Sagittarian energy to integrate, right? To integrate mind energy, information, and also our conditioning, because very often, you know, that inner dialogue that we have very often stems from a conditioning that we have enjoyed growing up. You know, the things that we've soaked up from other people, that other people have said to us, things that, you know, people have said to each other, things that we've heard about, you know, on television or through other mediums, you know, we soak stuff up as children. And so all of that is part of our, you know, knowledge base, or part of our information base that's in here in our computer up here, right? That's all part of the programming. So conditioning, you could think of it as like programming, right? So, but what do we need to integrate between that mind energy and the Sagittarian wisdom energy generated from life's experiences and the quest for a larger truth or a bigger understanding about life in general? You know, why am I here? What's the purpose of this human existence? You know, why do I feel the things I feel? You know, how am I... you know, how can I look at life in such a way that I can have or enjoy greater happiness for myself? You know, these are all, you know, Sagittarian-based questions, right? So we want to really start to find sort of like a way to integrate that mind energy with that wisdom energy, right? Now, all the full moon questions that I'm giving through the full moon video are also going to be available in writing via my weekly forecasts by the evening of November 18th. So feel free to go to my website and log into your member page and just look for the full moon post, which will be on November 23rd. Right? And so look for that post, and then you will have all the questions available there too, in case you want to, you know, journal with the questions or meditate with them or anything like that. Now, let's talk about some other things that are connected to this full moon chart. And, you know, feel free to also watch this video in small chunks, right? So if you want to take a break right now and then go into the next phase of what we're going to be talking about, feel free to do so, right? Now, Jupiter and the Sun have just recently moved into Sagittarius. Jupiter was in Scorpio for a whole year and has just moved into Sagittarius. So this is inviting us to emerge from the depth of our own darkness into the light again, where we discover the meaning and purpose of those difficult passages that we've been through in the past year, and gain a little bit of a deeper understanding of ourselves and life. So what you want to ask yourself here is, what shadow parts, so you know, the fears or suppressed parts of ourselves, disowned sides of ourselves that we don't want to be with, you know, what shadow parts have I learned to face, embrace, and integrate in the past year? And you know, some of us may have been able to dive into that a little bit deeper than others. But whatever you've experienced might also be sort of like a hint of some of the things that you may need to embrace and integrate more. So think also about the experiences that you've had in the past year. And how might this process of integrating some of these shadow parts of myself have created more empowerment within me? You know, so because when we do that, we usually tend to feel a little bit more whole and more integrated within ourselves. We feel a little bit more grounded in who we are because we're no longer rejecting parts of ourselves. So how might that have empowered us and not just yourself, but also the world around you? Because of course, when you empower yourself, that has an impact on every person that you interact with, on every situation in your life, right? So it really has an impact on the whole world in a sense. And so what have I gained in the past year from those experiences? That's another really, really great question, because of course, when we have difficult experiences that we go through, or when we face shadow sides of ourselves, that can feel a little uncomfortable. And so we want to ask ourselves, what's the gain from that? You know, how do we feel differently after we've done that? Or, you know, maybe there is more that we need to be doing in that regard. But we also want to really understand, like, what have I gained, you know, so far? You know, what have I gained from this process and from those experiences? So we also need to bear in mind that everything and everyone is connected. energetically speaking, we're all connected on and in terms of that energy field that exists, that's called the universe, right? So our efforts that we make within ourselves, with ourselves, ripple out. They affect everything and everyone around us. So whatever work we do on ourselves, however large or small it is, it doesn't even matter. Whatever work we do on ourselves, whatever we manage to integrate, however much we manage to integrate, we're not just doing this for ourselves, we are doing this for everybody, because everything ripples out. It's like the drop in the water that starts to like ripple out into the whole, the whole ocean has that ripple effect. Now, Jupiter, which is the ruler of Sagittarius, is an important planet in this full moon chart. So currently it's in its own sign. And so that makes it more powerful because it feels very comfortable there. And in this full moon chart, it's making an opposition to the moon in Gemini, and it aligns with the sun in Sagittarius. So what does that mean? So this brings a greater awareness that there are new possibilities, that there are greater realities out there. And these aspects really encourage us to engage in a dialogue, with ourselves, with life, with other people. It encourages us to engage, to brainstorm and envision new possibilities for our own lives and also with other people. So we are really invited here to see the bigger picture, to go beyond what we already know, to just really kind of zoom out. And when it comes to zooming out, what you can notice there is like when you do that visually, when you do it physically, right? When you do it just like if you just zoom out with your, if you look at a particular point in front of you and then you just kind of like zoom out from that point of vision and you just let your vision expand, and you let your peripheral vision grow and you kind of like look to see what else you can see. Just doing that, right, can really help you in expanding something internally, emotionally, spiritually. So I want you to just kind of experiment with that and see what happens when you do that, right? And then you can start practicing that also with a thought, right? So not just visually, but also like with a thought. If you take a thought that you've kind of been stuck on and that you feel like is like something that keeps coming up for you, a reoccurring thought, and then maybe just kind of like see if you can zoom out from that thought and kind of step back a little bit and lean back from it and just see, okay, what happens if I lean back from that thought? What else appears? What else shows up? What other possibilities and opportunities show up when I kind of zoom out a little bit? So that's really a wonderful exercise that you can engage in if you feel like doing that. But there's also some questions that you can ask yourself for the next 2 weeks in regards to this, to these aspects. What do I learn about life every day just by living it? Not by thinking about it, just by living it. What do I learn just by living life? And how does the experience of my current reality inform what I believe about life? And this is a very important question because very often we don't even realize that we're doing that, right? Very often we don't realize that what we experience, what we engage in life, has a lot to do with what we say is true about life, what we believe is true about life. But it becomes almost like an automatic, right? We don't think about that very often. We don't stop to think, is that what's happening? Is that what's true? Is my belief coming from something that I've just experienced, right? Or am I even just experience something and then I make up the belief around it because I say, oh, because I experienced this means that, right? So we want to kind of pay attention to when we're doing that because that's very powerful, and it can really change how we relate to life. And so other questions you can ask yourself here too, and I maybe want to encourage you to even journal on this. Is what I believe about life the truth? And what is truth? What's the difference between my truth and truth? And I know these questions sound very similar, but if you write them out, and I want to encourage you to go to the weekly forecasts when the weekly forecast is up, and maybe write these down in your journal. Just if you write them out, you can see how these are some very different questions from each other. But to just kind of journal on those 3 questions, I think could be a real great exercise in expanding your mind a little bit, right? So, is what I believe about life the truth? What is truth? What's the difference between my truth and truth? And can truth ever be anything but true? And that's a really important question, and I want you to really slow down when you ask that question. Can truth ever be anything but true? Can it change? Can truth change? And if something has the ability to change, is it still the truth or simply my truth? So these are some very, very powerful questions that I want to just invite you to journal on and see what comes up for you when you do. Because this could be very fascinating, right? What you do with that. Now, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. Right? So that's another planet that's really important in this full moon chart. And Mercury is currently also in Sagittarius. So we have the ruler of Sagittarius and the ruler of Gemini, both in Sagittarius. And Mercury is currently also retrograde. And it's been retrograde since November 16th. So if you're watching this video before November 16th, then it's not yet retrograde. But it will go retrograde on November 16th. So the retrograde always makes the energy of the planet a little bit louder internally, right? So internally we feel this energy way louder. So this invites us to really rethink some of our beliefs about life. It gives us the opportunity, to reorganize ourselves a little bit when it comes to what we believe is true about life. So one of the things with this retrograde phase is you can kind of engage a little bit more with seeking to understand rather than being understood. Because that is going to become even truer now than it ever has been. And how could you live this out when dealing with other people, when communicating with other people? Because this could be a very important thing during the retrograde phase, right? Seek to understand rather than be understood. Because our tendency with Sagittarius very often is we want to make sure that other people know our truth. That we know that other people understand what's true for us, what we believe is true, and we want to make sure that other people believe that that's true for them too. But with this Mercury retrograde, we may want to rethink that, and we may want to really look to see how can we seek to understand where somebody else is coming from and what their understanding about life is or what their beliefs about life are before we try to be understood by another person. Very powerful. So I want you to just kind of like sit with that and see how that feels for the next 2 weeks, right? During the full moon. And then until December 6th, which is how long Mercury will be retrograde until, I want you to contemplate or ask yourself, how might my perspective shift if I listened to my intuitive voice more than my conditioning? Right? And so conditioning is everything that we've kind of sponged up. It's all this information that is already in our in our software up here, that's sort of been programmed into it. So how might my perspective shift if I listened to my intuitive voice just a little bit more than my conditioning? So the things that I already know, right? And what might be possible if I opened up a dialogue with others about a larger conversation? And so that's a really interesting question because very often we want to have conversations or dialogues with other people about things that, we've already talked about, that we already know, things that we just want to, say again because it's something that we hold dear, or, something that we think is important. But what if we start to zoom out a little bit, right? When we have conversations with other people and go to kind of a larger place and say, okay, well, how about, we don't just talk about, the things we've always talked about. Let's zoom out a little bit and let's have a larger conversation, right? So that's something that we might want to contemplate in the next 2 weeks, especially, and maybe even until Mercury goes direct again, December 6th, right? Now, another question you can ask yourself with this Mercury retrograde: might connecting with figures from the past expand my thinking? So any kind of connections, relationships, clients, friends, people that we've had conversations before with, anybody from the past, might some of these conversations expand our thinking at this time? And who would I want to connect with if that were so? If we want to, if the agenda or the goal is to expand my thinking, who would I want to connect with? And what conversations do I need to have if I'm to experience an expansion of my thinking or an expansion of my mind? So these are all really just some really wonderful questions to ask with that Mercury retrograde. And also feel free to read my post about the Mercury retrograde phase in my weekly forecasts on November 16th, right? So that's the weekly forecast that I wrote for November 12th through the 18th. And Mercury goes retrograde on November 16th. So just look for that post in the weekly forecast post on my website. Now, the full moon chart also has a T-square. And again, feel free to take a break if this is getting too much information to digest. But if you want to continue, feel free to continue. But this is something that is going to be important to talk about. The full moon has a T-square in the chart, in the full moon chart. And this T-square involves Mars in Pisces. And Mars in Pisces squares the moon in Gemini and the Jupiter-Sun alignment in Sagittarius. So we have, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius. And so this asks us to stretch and grow by releasing anything that no longer supports our spiritual mental growth. So what does that mean? Spiritual mental growth, right? So anything that helps us grow spiritually, but that also helps us kind of expand mentally as well, right? So, and spiritually is sort of like more an energetic thing, where we intuitively and spiritually and energetically grow. And mentally, of course, is, our mind, the things we think about, the things we believe, the things we process, do we take in. So we may have a tendency here with this T-square to overdo or overexert ourselves. And our expectations of ourselves and others might be a little bit too high right now because there's a lot of movement that this T-square brings about. A lot of a lot of nervous movement, energetic movement. And so what you can ask yourself here is, what might open up for me if I expected 5% less of myself just for today? And so this is not something I want you to ask yourself in general with everything in life, right? But just for the next 2 weeks, as we're experiencing this T-square, what might open up if I expected 5% less of myself just for today? And what if I applied that to others as well? And the other thing you can ask yourself here too is, might paying attention to my physical energy level help me be realistic about how much I can expect of myself right now? Because, this is Mars is in Pisces, right? And with Mars in Pisces, our physical energy levels might be, a little bit more fluctuating, where we might want to pay attention a little bit more, like, where am I at right? Do I need to take a break right now, or do I need to, what does my body need right now so that I can feel like I'm in the flow with my energy field around me, right? And because we're dealing with the square to Sagittarius and Gemini, which is more busy mentally, our mind might just sometimes want to ignore, the energetic, the physical energy levels that are there. So if we pay attention just a little bit more to those physical energy levels within ourselves, might that maybe help us be more realistic about how much we can expect of ourselves right now. Okay, so that's a very, very important question for the next 2 weeks. Now, given that the empty leg of the T-square lands in Virgo, we always want to look at what's opposite the focus point of that T-square, which is the focus point is Mars in Pisces, and what's opposite that. So that would be Virgo, right? So let's take a look at Virgo and see how we can find a solution to those tensions that we're experiencing there. So we're invited to act from a place of clarity, Virgo, right? Clarity and discernment. Virgo is very much about discernment. So what we can ask ourselves here is, how might my actions help others achieve more clarity? Because Mars is in Pisces, so it's about action, right? And so with a Mars Virgo, right, there's always a wanting to help, wanting to be there for other people, right? So how might my actions help others achieve more clarity, Virgo? And could I combine the kindness of the heart energy, which is Pisces, with the clarity of the mind energy, which is Virgo? And since Virgo is also associated with health routines or health issues, you might also ask yourself, what health routines would support my physical and emotional well-being at this time? Because with Mars in Pisces, we really want to make sure that we're paying attention to our physical and emotional well-being. Now, when investigating our daily routines, it can be tempting to approach things from this place of like good or bad, right or wrong. But what we really want to be asking ourselves is, what works and what doesn't work right now for me? What do I see when I look at all of this through the lens of practical neutrality? And again, that's Virgo, right? Practical neutrality. It's really about, does this work or does it not work? And if it doesn't, let's throw it out. Let's go with what works. So that's really what Virgo is about at its highest vibration, right? And so that's where we really want to kind of bring more attention to, so we can make this T-square work a little bit better for ourselves. Now, finally, I would like to mention the energy of the Neptune station at the time of the full moon, and Neptune square to Mercury in Sagittarius. So Neptune is in Pisces, of course, right now, and is exalted at the time of the full moon because of that station phase. And it's preparing to come to a halt and ending its 5 months retrograde phase that it's been in. And so this brings our attention to things like universal love, our inner divinity, spirituality, inspiration, compassion, things like that. But we may also feel more sensitive because we're feeling that Neptune energy more strongly. So we feel more sensitive and more in touch with the vibration that is all around us. So not only the vibration that is inside of us, but also everything that's around us. So that can sometimes also make us a little bit more tired, or we might feel a little bit more confused, especially if we're not tapping into that vibration consciously. We could feel a little bit overwhelmed by that. And so we may want to escape reality for a while with this Neptune station phase. Now, we will also address the Neptune station phase and its direct movement, as well as those of Chiron and Mercury, in more detail in our next forecasting forum, which will be live on November 27th in the afternoon. So if you would like to find out how these station direct movements might impact you personally in your own chart, in your own birth chart, feel free to join us. If you're already a star or superstar member, watch out for an email the day of the webinar, as well as within 24 hours of the live event, and get the links to join live or listen to the MP4 video presentation of the forecasting forum, right? Now, if you are a universal member and you can and you just want to register for this particular forecasting forum, feel free to go to my homepage and look for the monthly forecasting forum countdown on the homepage, and you can click on register there. Or if you want to take the plunge and upgrade to star or superstar membership, you can join us every month at no extra charge, and you get some other wonderful perks as well. So feel free to take a look at that as well if you like, and you can do that on the back end inside your members portal. You can upgrade there where it says subscriptions, right? So where your subscriptions are in the member portal, that's where you can upgrade to the next subscription if you like. Now let's talk a little bit about Neptune square to Mercury. Now that could create a lack of clarity and objectivity. So you can see like we really have some work to do here with the Virgo energy with this chart here, so we can create a little bit more clarity and objectivity. And we want to be conscious of, you know, that we're not kind of like trying to get sucked into this sense of like being a little bit, you know, loosey-goosey with stuff, or being a little bit floaty or clouded by certain issues. So what we want to pay attention to is, you know, we may neglect important details, you know, with this square. That said, though, we're also a lot more imaginative at this time. So anything that we want to do that's creative or that is spiritually inclined might work a little bit better. And we also have a true gift to inspire other people right now with the Neptune-Mercury square too. So one good tip here might be not to believe everything that you hear, you know, especially when it comes through media or through some sources that you are not fully 100% sure about that they might be trustworthy. And also anything that sounds too good to be true, it might just be that, too good to be true. So we want to pay attention to that with Neptune squaring Mercury. And there may also be a pull between feeling introverted versus extroverted, because Neptune in Pisces is a little bit more of an inward energy where we want to go within, more get in touch with our intuition. And Mercury in Sagittarius is way more extroverted oriented, where we want to connect, you know, or be engaged with life. You know, it's sort of like an extroverted engagement. And so it could also be the difference between wanting to move fast and slow, right? Because Sagittarius moves more faster and Pisces moves more slowly. And so if you feel such a pull, you know, just ask yourself, could I simply tune in for a moment and see if I need to take a break or at least slow down a little? Could I be 5% more compassionate and kind to myself? Because when we feel this push and pull, you know, sometimes there can be just feeling a little bit nervous or feeling a little bit irritated or whatever may show up. So could I be 5% more compassionate and kind to myself? Now, with so many planets and points in mutable signs, right, which is Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius, there's nothing in Virgo, but Virgo is the empty leg. So we're definitely wanting to use that Virgo energy. But with so many planets and points in mutable signs, we might feel restless. We might feel pulled in many directions. And so we might experience life being extra busy, but it also could feel a little bit ungrounded, or we could feel overwhelmed or distracted in some way. So ask yourself, am I feeling overwhelmed? Do I get easily distracted right now? And if the answer to these questions is yes, I am feeling that, or I am getting easily distracted, as best as you can, center yourself in the here and now. Because the mind has a tendency to go, to jump around a lot and go a lot into the future or into the past, or it's just not very often very grounded in the here and now. So as best as you can, center yourself in the here and now, allow yourself to be present. Listen to what's inside of you beyond the mind, beyond mental activity up there, and trust your intuitive self. and trust that all is well all the time and things are unfolding exactly as they need to. That's sort of like bringing the mind back into the heart space and connecting the mind with the heart, right? So when we're able to do that versus being divorced from our heart and just in the mind energy where everything's kind of like busy and active, and we need to, problem solve, or we need to understand something, or we need to look here and there, sort of like at that moment we get divorced from our heart energy and from our intuitive energy. So by tapping back into the heart, we can be a little bit more present in the here and now. We can really start to trust a little bit more that all is well all the time, which can be very useful. Now, one of the things that I do when I get overwhelmed, for example, is I will start to write everything down on a piece of paper. The reason why I do that is because it helps me get it out of my head, and kind of when I get it out of my head, I can start dropping more into my heart. I can start trusting a little bit more, and I can start slowing down a little bit, because I can start to look at that, whatever I've written down on that piece of paper, and go, okay, it's all there. Nothing's going to be missed. I'm going to just take it one moment at a time and do whatever is on that list and whatever is on that piece of paper. But I'm not going to, try to do it all at once. So that can help me slow down a little bit and can help me get a little bit more grounded in the here and now and get more connected to my heart. That's just something that I do. This may not work for you, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but it's just something that you can experiment with if you want to, right? Now, another question you can ask yourself when you feel really overwhelmed is what is the worst that can happen here? So if you feel this like anxiety and like everything's kind of like collapsing over you, what is the worst that can happen here? And it may sound really odd, but that question really puts a sort of like a border or a limit around this anxiety that we're feeling that can arise with overwhelm, right? And that really helps our infinite self to see that fear is finite, that there is a limitation to fear, that if we can just point towards, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Then we can say, okay, all right, well, if that's the worst thing that can happen, all right, then that's not so bad, right? And then we can just maybe start to pull back a little bit and move more into our heart again, from that mind energy, pull more into the heart energy. Now, following our inner guidance on a daily basis is going to be really very important for the next 2 weeks, as is releasing our victim-based thinking that can really drown that inner guidance out that we're trying to connect with. So the best way to notice victim mentality is to catch ourselves when we blame others, when we blame life for our current experiences. And when we notice that, if we catch ourselves doing this, just simply acknowledge it gently and be kind to yourself about it. Because we all do this from time to time, right? It's like human to do this. But it is good to notice it. It's good to notice when we're doing it, to not stay unconscious with that, or not stay at an autopilot with that. To really acknowledge it and gently go, oh, look at that. That's interesting what I just did. I just started blaming this person, or I just started blaming life for what's currently going on in my life. And so we just want to notice that, because that's not resourceful, and it does create a sort of like a victim feeling, like I have no power, which is not the truth, because each one of us is the creator of our own life. So we do have the power to shift our life simply by the way we're looking at it. And that's a big part of the power that we hold and that we carry, is we can always choose to respond differently to life, or to what life hands us. And if we're willing to do that, and if we're willing to experiment with that, we can take our power back, and we're no longer in this victim mentality. So this is something you can just kind of try to experiment with. Now, to sum it all up for this full moon, and feel free to take a break before you listen to the sum of the total of the full moon. there are the facts. Then there is our interpretation of what happened, and we can really attribute meaning, and we can generate assumptions and conclusions to everything that takes place, right? And so this, in turn, when we do that, it can really harden us into beliefs that we've created, and those beliefs, they create our reality. So our thinking, our viewing of life really creates how we experience and perceive life. So when we change our interpretation of the facts, we can change our perspective. And that starts creating a different reality for ourselves. So this is very important, right? And so this really requires an open mind and an open heart. In order for us to do this, to shift our interpretation of facts and change our perspective and create a new reality for ourselves, we need to, first of all, have an open mind and an open heart. And that's where the zooming out happens, right? We can do the zooming out from the heart. We can do the zooming out from the mind. But just let yourself do this, just see how that feels when you do this. Just open your peripheral vision and open your heart energy like that. So we really need to remember that everything is always interacting with everything else, right? Because, in life, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Because energy is everywhere. And if my own energy ripples out, my thinking, my feeling, my exploring, my believing, my physical energy, my physical vibration, my spiritual vibration, if all of that ripples out, that means that nothing happens in a vacuum, right? So everything is always interacting with everything else. So if that is true, what is universal truth? What is it? Wouldn't it have to be something that is true no matter what? No matter what country I come from, no matter what color my skin is, no matter what my sexual orientation, no matter what my status in society, my age, my physical appearance, no matter what, universal truth is true for everything, everyone, for the whole world, right? So for the next 2 weeks, you could ask yourself, am I ready to let go of what I think is true just so I can find out for sure? And what doesn't change no matter when or how often I look? And really try to sit with that question for a while before you investigate it. What doesn't change no matter when or how often I look? And could I look beyond the mind and tap into the larger field of energy all around me? And what nourishes my soul when I do that? And could I make time for silence, surrender, and self-reflection, even if it's just a few minutes every day, even if I just have very, very little time? Could I make time for silence, surrender, and self-reflection? Now, if you have an ascendant, career point, or personal planets in 0 to 3 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces, or 29 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius, then this full moon will definitely be you will be more affected by this full moon. You will feel the energies more strongly. And if you have any questions about the full moon, or if you don't know where the full moon lands in your own personal birth chart, feel free to ask me questions during the forecasting forum. Reach out and either in advance or during the forum. The forecasting forum will be on November 27th again. If you have any general questions about the full moon or astrology, you can always ask me via email. That's not a problem. But anything more personal, I will ask you to either book a reading with me or to ask questions during the monthly forecasting forum if the question is not too elaborate. And then also I want to mention that if you have any difficulties at all with any of the membership functions, or if you have any questions about any of the things that you receive from your memberships, whether that's the coaching sessions or the readings or the soul-based basics courses or anything else, reach out to either ask me via email at info@astrologercoach.com, or you can also watch the members demo video, which is like a very, very short video. I think it's less than 5 minutes long. And I will attach that members demo video to the members only full moon video email that you will receive a week before the full moon becomes exact, right? Or approximately a week before the full moon becomes exact. So if you want to look at that demo video, and if you still have questions after that, again, feel free to email me. And as always, the full moon questions will be available via my weekly forecast by the evening of November 18th. I think everything else we've already mentioned. Please keep in mind that as a star and superstar member, you do receive major discounts for any of my personal readings. So make sure that when you do ask for a reading that these discounts are available to you, that you signed into your membership portal. And as a superstar member, after being a member for about 2 months on my online community, you do receive the Soul-Based Basics course, which includes 6 90-minute classes about astrology and the birth chart. So this is a really fantastic course to watch if you haven't gotten the chance to watch it yet. I highly recommend it, especially it's helpful with understanding your own birth chart, and also if you join the monthly forecasting forums, it can be a great class to watch, to give you an even better understanding of what we talk about in the monthly forecasting forums. Besides, the video how to read your birth chart, right? Because that's another video you can watch for the monthly forecasting forums as well. All right, so that's it. I hope this was enjoyable, and I hope you guys were able to take in all the information and maybe take some breaks in between. Have a fantastic full moon, and remember to not overexert yourself, to slow down maybe here and there, and take really good care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and mentally if you can. And I will be back in another 2 weeks for the new moon video. And if you need anything else, feel free to reach out and email me. All right, this is Astrologer Coach Sonia Francis. Namaste. Love you all. Bye-bye.